First Nations University of Canada in Saskatchewan is under fire after an internal investigation into its president was leaked. The report obtained by APTN News looks into allegations against FNU President Jacqueline Ottmann over nepotism and mismanagement. The report prepared by Deloitte Legal Canada substantiated many of the allegations and found the president created a so-called circle of favour around her office. A statement from the chair of the Board of Governors at First Nations University said the reports were analysed and the vote was held to retain Ottmann. For more on this, our Truth and Politics panel is here. Jennifer Laewetz is the CEO of Paskwâw Strategies, and Niigaan Sinclair is a columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press. Jennifer, Niigaan, great to see you as always. Jennifer, we're back in your neck of the woods here again this week, so we'll start with you. What do you make of the allegations against First Nations University President Jacqueline Ottmann?
Well, I think the allegations are quite serious, especially when we're hearing about them through the media and reports are being released that says there's a lot of internal issues happening. It definitely raises the questions what's going on internally over there. And it's also a part of a bigger picture on all of these investigations that currently are taking place with our institutions and governments and organizations that are Indigenous led. These third-party investigations are starting to raise questions on what the purpose of them is, because it seems like when the reports come out, we're automatically on the defense for sure, but it raises the question on whether or not we need more accountability and transparency mechanisms internally to handle these sorts of things.
Niigaan, the chair of the Board of Governors says it commissioned and reviewed the reports, and the board voted to retain Ottmann. The statement says the board has complete confidence in the president and stands behind her. Your thoughts on all of this?
For anyone who doesn't know the history of the First Nations University, the absolute scandal that was just a decade or so ago involved political interference at the campus, in which that massive overhauls of the board took place, in which elected officials who frankly should never run a university, or at least should not have the balance of power when it comes to major decisions involving academics. People should be free to speak and study and not have to worry about retribution. That involved a whole restructuring of the board, which was then removed, so that now, just a few years ago, now First Nations chiefs are once again back in power. This is a massive problem. It's a problem that makes our institutions look highly problematic. It doesn't have any longevity. It's clear that just a few years ago, when the chiefs took the balance of the power at the First Nations University, it led to a number of concerning, then rising issues with this current president. And on the allegations of this president, while they have perhaps aren't the clearest point of that report was that the individual who brought the concerns, the financial concerns, to light was immediately removed by the president. That should tell you a lot about the perceived allegations of guilt. If you remove the person, what are you so scared of? If you're not able to face some of the questions at the person that you have in charge of your finances, and you remove them instead of deal with them directly, I mean, what else do you have to say about the concerning features of that report?
Jennifer, concerned First Nations University faculty are starting to come forward. Among the things they're calling for is the suspension of the executive, including Ottmann, and the board to be dissolved, among other things. Should the board and those funding the institution be listening to the faculty?
I think so, of course. You know, the faculty of educational systems are the bread and butter. They're the backbone of your institution. And I echo what Niigaan said. I wholeheartedly believe in academic independence. Any type of political interference into educational institutions is highly problematic and quite concerning. And, you know, we've been hearing about the FSIN's involvement with First Nations University for quite some time. There's been legislation that's been changed at the FSIN level. They weren't involved, then they were involved, they weren't involved, then they were involved. And it's starting to get more and more concerning that we're seeing these direct political decisions play out. And I'm worrying about the integrity of the faculty and how much they feel they're going to be heard when these evidence-based reports are coming out and we're not listening to them, how bad is the divide going to be? And what are we doing to actually attract good professors and good faculty into our institutions that teach our fellow First Nations people when they are seeing it play out widely that, their concerns are not going to be heard?
Right. Niigaan, you had mentioned this, but this isn't the first time First Nations University has had troubles. About 15 years ago, the Saskatchewan government and federal government withheld millions in funding for the university over governance issues. Do you think there's a risk of that happening here again?
Oh, undoubtedly. I mean, when you are on probation and you begin to perceived or not, get up to activities that look very eerily similar to the reasons you're on probation in the first place, what happens? You immediately go on probation, and this goes on all of us. This makes all of us look terrible. I mean, every single Indigenous person who is working at a university already has to face monumental questions about the legitimacy of the work that we do, the departments that we run, the very fact that we're there in the first place. And so then when you get an organization or you get a group of individuals who then act in questionable means or have certainly ways in which they suggest questions in the activities that they do, that then leads on all of us. It impacts all of us, because every single Indigenous person in a university therefore is implicated. If you, the simple statement, if you can't run your own university, then why is it that we're giving you a department? Why is it that we're recognizing your relevancy in arts? Or why is it that we require young Canadians to learn 3 credit hours in Indigenous anything? This implicates all of us, and it is very concerning.
Jennifer, Niigaan, we're going to have to leave it there, and we're going to continue this conversation on First Nations University over on the podcast. Thanks to you both. Jennifer, the faculty's also calling for the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations, the FSIN, to, quote, end political interference in the governance and administration of First Nations University. Can you, for those who might not quite understand how the FSIN is involved here, what's their role in First Nations University?
Well, from what I understand is they have a little bit of the governing authority over the board, and that's what I was referring to earlier on in the panel, how that was removed and then brought back. So there are actually appointees that come from the FSIN put onto that board, and it is highly, highly political. I mean, look at what's going on with the FSIN right now. Look at their statement they put out on Friday and how incredibly controversial and attack dog style it was. This is a political organization. The FSIN is inherently political. It is partisan in some degree. It's concerning that they would have any oversight or influence over an academic body as it is. I stand with the faculty that feel uncomfortable with this. I think that they have every right to feel uncomfortable with this, and I will stand on that opinion, because right now, I'm sorry, but if I were involved in any capacity with the FSIN, being an oversight onto the body that I have to report to, I would be concerned.
Niigaan, you kind of touched on this, but you work at a university. Does it make sense to have a political advocacy organization in charge?
This is tricky because on one level, you want First Nations involvement on academic affairs, especially when it comes to ethics involving non-Indigenous professors, but in some cases Indigenous professors who work with communities who can at times do research that can be exploitative, that can be harmful. And so you want governance involved with an academic institution, but not at the controlling power. And that's what Jennifer was speaking about just a minute ago. At the First Nations University, I don't think there's any problems with there being chiefs appointed to boards, but they cannot hold the majority of the power. Way back in the day, 15 years ago, there was 36 chiefs that were all receiving honorariums and supports to be able to be on the First Nations University of Canada board. And then you got overwhelmingly political decisions because they've had the vast majority of votes. Now they have a very slim majority, but it's still a majority. And it indicates to you that on academic affairs, you do not want political people of any stripes to be holding the majority positions on a board, on anything involving academic decisions. Like, why is it that we care very deeply that there be research that's fair, balanced, considering those who have been marginalized most often by political institutions? Maybe they say things that are sometimes not amicable to whoever is elected this week. You do not want people who are political in charge of the majority of the decisions on any academic board.
Jennifer, this is, excuse me, Canada's only fully dedicated First Nations university. How do you think this looks on a larger scale?
It doesn't look good, especially when education is, a core principle of reconciliation, especially in the eyes of Canada. It is something that we've been fighting for. And I'm starting to notice this concerning pattern, even from fellow Indigenous people that dismiss these concerns, reports, or investigations, or even audits that are coming out as being, the fault of the government or it's colonial. It's not, we're not accepting the fact that although, the government has historically been a problem for us as Indigenous people, but these are academic institutions, and on the FSIN, that's a political organization that represents treaty rights. These are areas where oversight and integrity are not things that we just throw out the window and make excuses for not upholding. This is getting exhausting. We are seeing it across the board now, and I truly believe it's because these younger generations are coming in and they want better, they want to fight for the future. And I think until we start prioritizing things like, integrity, transparency, accountability, this will keep happening over and over and over again. And on a larger scale, the First Nations University is one of its kind. And what are we telling the rest of the country when, the one institution we have in Saskatchewan like this is embodied in controversy and all of these things? It's just very, very disappointing, because I wholeheartedly believe that we can do better and we should be doing better.
And Niigaan, as you mentioned, this implicates people outside the borders of Saskatchewan, just on the surface here. What are your thoughts on what happens next? What should happen here?
Okay, so it's pretty simple. That there is enough suspicion that there needs to be some sort of third party, and I realize that there is no other First Nations university or academic structure, although there are certain organizations faculty run with Indigenous faculty members across the country. There has to be somebody involved outside of the circles of this university to assist in the transition. If they are going to keep the executive, then there's got to be a whole set of healing that will take place. That will take years. I mean, we have faculty members who are writing anonymous letters to media, to people all across the board, saying that they don't feel that they can say anything without major fear of retribution. I can tell you that I personally have been reached out by several faculty members and elders, traditional people at the First Nations University, who are very fearful about their jobs. And these are people who have served decades. These are not just random people who have walked in off the street. These are people who have long, successful careers, who have now deep concerns over the individuals in charge. I think the much more simpler path to success would be a reset on the executive. It would be a restructuring of the board, similar to what happened in the last 15 years, restructuring, so that the chiefs don't have the majority of power, and that we appoint people in collaboration with other academic institutions across the country to get leadership in charge of the First Nations University, which is First Nations, which is Inuit, which is Métis, making sure that there is leadership as expertise, that has expertise, not just random anybody. But then on top of that, that we also make sure that there is involvement from First Nations, whether that be chiefs or not, is, I think, up to very different ways and structures as we go. I think probably what you need an academic board from the FSIN who are objective and do not serve directly the interests of chiefs.
Jennifer, Niigaan, we're going to leave it there for this week. Thanks to you both.
Yeah, miigwech. Thanks.